Meteorologist Casey Cloud back with you here on this Wednesday, jumping on because we do have a flash flood warning now in effect for much of the St. Augustine area until about 6:45 p.m. So we need to go ahead and make sure we're really taking this seriously there in the lower part of St. Johns County, as there's been quite a bit of rain here in a pretty short period of time. As we're looking at things and as we're tracking things here, I know just have to be very mindful of the situation there as we're looking, because that one indicator there just east of I-95, so in the 2.5 inches of rain have fallen, there in a pretty short period of time between about 4:30 and 5:08. I mean, that is substantial, and to have that, maybe even a little bit heavier right over a flood-prone area like St. Augustine's downtown area, that's very concerning. Now, it was some purple here a moment ago. Reds are still very concerning, not quite as high a rainfall rates, but we need to get that red and purple out of there before the waters will start to really recede. Until that red, starts to break up here, we're going to have some problems as we're looking at things and as we're tracking things there in toward our region. So just got to be really careful here with this. You see the 1 hour rainfall estimates according to Doppler. You see this shows about 3 inches out here again. Right in downtown it's showing 2 inches, but that may be underdone just a little as this is coming from right a little bit further away, and it's a few minutes behind as well. So we really need to be very careful there around St. Augustine. This could be one of those situations where some of those roads are probably already starting to see those waters here get pretty high, and you gotta be, at rush hour especially, very mindful. You gotta turn around, don't drown here, folks. You need to, make sure you kind of take that, evasive action here right now to avoid those more dangerous areas here on roads where some of those could be starting to get under a foot or two of water. It's not out of the question based on how we know here, geographically how St. Augustine floods. So I need to be very mindful of this, be very careful, obviously, in this type of situation. Let me jump this graphic on real quick as we go ahead and say that a flash flood warning can indicate that rapidly worsening flooding is possible. There's a higher potential to quickly bring danger to people and property through at least a rapid water rise. And we haven't got to considerable or catastrophic with this. That's what we saw in North Texas. This is a base flash flood warning, so it's not going to set off the phone alert, the general one for the emergency, one there through the wireless emergency alerts, but it does set off other radios as there is more urgent concern than just a regular flood warning or a flood advisory. So I need to be very mindful of this here as we're tracking things, as we're monitoring things here in toward the weather center. So again, there's a flash flood warning for parts of St. Johns County right now in our covered area until 6:45. I mean, the worst of the threat will be hopefully, receding before then. Probably, worse is about right now as we're tracking that area there around St. Augustine and St. Johns County. We're just seeing this persistent activity sit over this area and cause problems here. You got to be very mindful, obviously, very mindful of this situation here as we're looking at things, as we're tracking it. I'm going to check some weather stem sites. I want to see how much rain the gauges are showing there right now. I'm going to do St. John's weather stem here, and let's see what I can get real quick on this at stjohns.weatherstem.com. So let's go to City of St. Augustine and see how much rain is falling there on that site. I'll put it to that to you in real time here as we look at the numbers. We had a gust of 46 miles an hour. That's pretty noteworthy in and of itself. The rain total is 2 inches. So that's not as bad as that wind gust number. This means it's almost a severe storm there as well. I know I've been watching some wind enhancement. I think that's kind of faded some, the wind enhancement. We're in a spot here, honestly, there might have been some rotation with this, but that was right before that flash flood warning got issued, really, and unfortunately, the radar's too far away to know if something was really happening. We'll have to see if there's some damage reports from any type of wind enhancement that might have got down toward the surface there, but again, the Jackson radar, if you're just tuning in, is unfortunately down for, the maintenance. I don't know if it's going to take as long as it's going to now take here as we're looking at things and as we're tracking things. So, again, that's unfortunate there as we do have a number of folks in the dark in the state of Florida here. As we're looking at periodic numbers, I know this is the first warning we've had locally. We were on earlier, but so far only 132 in St. Johns County. But as we're looking toward parts of Clay County with 7,000 customers in the dark there, Duval County over 10,000. We did not have any wind warnings of any kind there, so that's kind of surprising. But we talked about we were a little concerned. Bradford faring pretty well. There's only 11 customers from what I'm seeing here, at least the ones that are tracked. I don't think City of Stark would be on that, but my point being is, a little surprising the radar may not be, pinpointing the exact spot to where the worst of this is, since we're having to use the distant view from Moody Air Force Base by Austin, Georgia. So, kind of having to guess a little bit here on some of this, but again, just trying to keep you guys informed on the situation. Let me go ahead and zoom out. We did see some pretty nasty wind enhancement in Baker. It's somewhat in Columbia right now. As we're tracking things. This 5-foot warning here does include areas around St. Augustine. There in St. Johns County. Again, this is, something where we're having trouble seeing how bad it is. Let me go. Ooh, look at that gust down towards Central Florida. Is that a warned area? I hope it was. I don't think it was it? That must have just, they might need issues. That might have just happened. Wow. They just had a gust of 65 in Orlando, and there wasn't a warning on that. But I digress. As we're seeing a storm down to the east of that, even some weak rotation around Tuliota down there in Central Florida. But as we're looking, I wanted to show you that radar up for St. Augustine of Volano Beach area, give or take. So some pretty heavy rain up here. As we're looking at things, as we're tracking things here in toward the weather center. So let me go ahead and keep looking here. The wind doesn't look as bad as it did. Let's get back to the Moody site. Unfortunately, Jacksonville is down, so it's making it a lot harder today to know what's really going on down toward the surface. But this estimates at least 3 inches here in the last hour, and we had one report of 2.5 to the north. So let me go ahead and check on some more information here. Bear with me. Just bear with me. Let's see what other sensors are giving us. Let me zoom out a little on the radar first. I'm going to check the St. Augustine High School number, 2.3 inches there. A lot of this within an hour, which can cause flooding, even if it didn't feel like a whole bunch of rain. Honestly, it looked like more than that from some of the radar perspectives. But let's see, South Ponte Vedra Beach Fire Station, how much rain there? 0.48. This is 24-hour, but we're really talking about this event in St. Johns County EOC. Okay, 3.26 inches last 24 hours there, so that's noteworthy in that part of the region. After everything that happened in Texas, we have a little bit of a heightened awareness here to these flash flood warnings. As we're looking, I know in Duval County they've had some problems with flooding, even though there wasn't a flash flood warning. San Marco, maybe some vehicles even being impacted, it would seem, in toward the Duval County vicinity. So that's never what you want to see, obviously, never what you want to hear. As we're looking and as we're tracking things. Again, just have to keep on looking here at this again. Let's go ahead and zoom back out here toward parts of Duval and Nassau. See some rain up there. See some areas of Columbia and Baker there with some heavy rainfall. Southeast Georgia there, south of Waycross, we have some heavy rain. Brunswick area has got a pretty nasty storm apparently trying to move on in. Some of these will kind of switch direction on us a little. Let me go ahead and try to loop this. You can kind of see how things have been going in odd directions here, and it makes it hard to track the situation sometimes as we're looking at things here meteorologically. Now, we already commented on our update earlier, but Sunday through Tuesday next week, the rain chances will be, maybe even in some ways more widespread, or more moisture coming into the view than what we had today. Today we had a 70% chance of a 70% chance in the forecast for next Monday, but to be that far out really indicating more confidence in things. We had the building confidence leading up to today on a higher reds guidance toward the east, but the broad guidance shows a more widespread threat even as we look ahead toward early next week. It would seem we don't need too much rain, but we do need some rain. You don't want to have too much, but we have still had some drought conditions towards some parts of the region. So let's go ahead and keep looking. You did have a gust there to 54 miles an hour at 11 past the hour. It looks like around St. Johns County and just west of Volcano Beach. And let's just continue to track things. 31 mile an hour wind a little bit north as we're tracking the situation. Again, some areas we've seen a measurement of over 3 inches EOC there last 24 hours, but I would think that most of that would be, in this recent event here, obviously, that's capable, of producing heavy rainfall as this accident has been. Let me go ahead and keep looking at things here, keep tracking them. By the way, the gust was actually 66 miles an hour on my other sources showing around Orlando. Didn't have a warning on that, but that was recorded at the Orlando Executive Airport. As we're going ahead and looking at things here, and sometimes you can just get little triggers to get those higher gusts. Got to always be aware, and that was probably measured pretty high up too, which would, maybe not have quite as much of an impact down at the ground level, but still be dangerous, An airport, I'm hoping, that, there was probably a ground stop in play, I would think, toward that area in Central Florida. But as we go ahead and continue to keep you guys up to date here, you see this flash flood warning on St. Augustine. That's why we had to jump back in here. You just got to remember to turn around, don't drown. If you have a flooded road there that, you think, well, maybe I should cross it. Maybe I have to cross it. Well, no, you shouldn't, because the 6 inches of flowing water can knock you down, and that vehicle gets caught in that, and you try to get out, and then that's how things can turn life-threatening very rapidly. So, again, we just got to be very cautious, very careful here. You see around Volcano Beach. I'm looking at some of their modes here for a second, but rainfall and the like. It looks like it's breaking up, but if I'm going to look at a distant radar view, let me go ahead and loop this around. So I'll go to the current. Okay, we loaded the frame. So you see how this all developed and stayed right over them. We were kind of seeing that when we were on last hour. And then it kind of fell apart, but, in the last couple frames. But you saw how the green box, the flash flood warning popped up. We had the purple indicating very heavy downpours. Maybe a little bit of hail in there. A little bit of wind enhancement even. I wouldn't be surprised if the power numbers, once you get more information, they start going up a little bit more there. But it takes a second for that detailed data to come into the system sometimes. But right there on St. Augustine and the like. Again, just continuing to give you guys the very latest here on this, right around I-95. And, we're looking there around US 1 and the like. But now it's starting to break up some, but you're just going to have to still pretty immediate, a few minutes deal with the aftermath of this heavy rain causing some flooding in towards some of these backyards and, roadways here. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and let that go to the end of that. I see there's a considerable flash flood warning in Texas right now. So the considerable threat, and that is out toward, well, let me check that. Okay, that's a considerable warning. Do I have everything on here right? Am I missing something? I may be. Okay, over here, around Brady. Okay. That's where there's a considerable flash flooding threat. It's a life-threatening situation there. Already saturated ground, and that rapidly can cause considerable street flooding there in the Brady community, and then you have to hopefully, see that avoid areas further south. As we're looking at some of these, it doesn't look like that's actually moving south, which is interesting. But we see some development there toward Kirk County, where all those people, lost their life, in the catastrophic flooding down there. But let's go back to the local view, our flash flood warning. They are continuing it for the St. Augustine area now. There's your box. Let me go ahead and switch to the other view here from the Moody's. So, okay, see the warning previous when they issued it, they said between 1 and 2.5 inches had fallen, and expected rainfall in 30 minutes was 3 inches, with additional amount of 2 inches possible. But now that's been revised downward because of all the rain that's happened, here. But at 5:35, observed rain amounts are surpassing 4 inches in the warned area, and local law enforcement is reporting ongoing flooding there in downtown St. Augustine. This is a little reminiscent of that flooding how it set up around Chicago last night, where they got about 5-6 inches pretty quick. I know this was not according to considerable. The rain rates are really dropping now, but between 2 and 4 inches of rain have fallen. The expected rainfall rate is a ½ inch in the next 30 minutes. But flash flooding is ongoing. So we have confirmed flash flooding there in St. Augustine. As you would expect, flash flooding of small creeks and streams, urban areas, highways, streets, and underpasses, as well as other poor drainage and low-lying areas, St. Augustine South, and St. Augustine Shores. And there's a tweet that just came out from the Weather Service in Jacksonville as well. Let me click on that, and I'm going to go ahead and be able to read that here on the air momentarily. So just bear with me as I got that information on in here in the Weather Center. We just got some information in from the Weather Service Jacksonville on another source here on social media. So, talking about that flooding there around St. Augustine, obviously. So many areas of downtown St. Augustine are flooded now, according to the Weather Service in Jacksonville, near the Cathedral Basilica there. 4.35 inches of rain have fallen since 4:30. So we had about 4 inches plus in an hour there. That's significant. We had that around here a couple years ago in Bradford, but St. Augustine's but the most flood-prone spot in our area. And then Davis Shores is reported 3.5 inches. I know that's a spot in general that can flood during, hurricanes and the like. So many areas in downtown St. Augustine are flooded, we're being told. Cathedral Basilica, 4.5 inches almost in the last hour. Now it's slacking off finally, but this is a dangerous weather situation as we're looking at things and as we're tracking them. Let me go ahead. I have some cameras that I'm not able to show you from right into St. Augustine. It's another source. It's not Florida 511. I was looking at one of them earlier. I didn't really notice anything on it, but I'm just going to go through all of them to see if I can figure out what roadways maybe are flooded here. I'm not able to show you these on the air. We don't have access to these to show from St. Augustine Live, though. If you want to look at them on the side here, these are helpful. YouTube cameras here on that platform. You can kind of look, see what's going on. They have tons of cameras. They have 11 different cameras, but I don't necessarily have any type of permission to show those on the air or anything. We're not going to sell them. I'm just going to look at all of them to see what I can gather. So the Lucky's Lookout camera, some pond in the water on the roadway. Looks like a pretty big puddle, but people are trying to get through it. Some folks with the umbrellas there. Bridge of Lines camera. Folks, looks like they're getting through pretty good there. Again, I can't see these to you on the air, but there's a lot of them in St. Augustine. It's not Florida 511 because there's some on the interstate, but they're not going to pick up where the worst of the flooding potential is. But some puddles for sure. But there might have been a little bit of small flooding on that first camera, Lucky's Lookout. But in St. Augustine skyline, you can't really make out the roads from that. And see there's a camera, the Matanzas camera. I'm just checking, make sure I'm not missing anything. Bear with me. Just a one-man band here, but it's all about protecting you, your friends, and your family. There's a boat camera. I know the boats are out there, and hopefully nobody's, got cut out in this. And then 17th century fort. Looks like quite a bit of pond in the water there. Right in front of that, not completely flooded at this moment, but it looks like quite a bit of heavy ponding there per se. As I'm looking at that again, I can't say these to you, but these are very helpful here. Figure out what's going on. People are walking on St. George Street right now. As we're tracking. There's some pond in the water on the roadway, but not overwhelming. Alligator farm. I know the alligators. And I wonder if they like this rain. That's an interesting camera. Yeah, I'm not able to say these, but there's quite a bit of, you would expect water to be around the alligators, but rain still coming down there. The Volano boat ramp. Looks like some, ponding of the water there. Maybe, that's a boat ramp. So again, you expect water, but maybe a little bit of that. Not really overwhelming looking. Again, I'm going through all these here. Okay, so nothing really crazy looking, which is good. But definitely some flooding, maybe more in areas that we're not able to see a view on. Now let me see, I'll pull up some for the interstate because I know the rain's really slacked off here at this point. We can see those. Let me see if I can effort some of those from the interstate there. The Florida 511 perspectives. Because those still show some pretty nasty commute conditions. Okay, this is Florida 511 camera. This is pretty nasty in and of itself. I mean, the speeds you're normally expecting to be faster, so some pretty inclement weather here, even if they're, right on the edge or outside the flash flood warning. Again, just got to be very mindful here, of these inclement conditions on the road. To be very careful with all this precip here, for sure. So again, just trying to tell you the weather story here. I took comparative numbers. Probably gonna wrap it soon based on I didn't see anything overwhelming on those cameras in St. Augustine, and the worst of the rain has stopped. I mean, there could be some areas that are having problems more based on law enforcement reporting, all that rain, 4 inches in an hour, is reported there as well. So that's significant. Very much so, don't get me wrong. But as we go ahead and continue, we're looking here at all the different views. I'll see if there's any questions or comments here in just a second. I didn't see many power outages in St. John's, which is good, obviously. There may be a few more, though, that are still taking time to add in the system. 160 there, but Duval over 12,000 and Clay almost 7,000. This is the only warning we've had today is the one we're tracking right now, especially. So there may be some more trouble in areas that we're not seeing camera sites from. I mean, a lot of cameras in that one source I told you about that I can't show necessarily St. Augustine live on YouTube, but my point is, there could be other areas that aren't covered, even though there's that many cameras, but there could be some significant flooding. It's not out of the question. Maybe some really low-lying areas there. So again, let me see if we have any questions or comments, concerns from any of the viewers here. Okay, Top Cat Ann watching there on YouTube. Thanks so much for watching there. I'm trying to kind of keep an eye on this situation for everybody for sure on this Wednesday. So very important to watch things. And speaking of watching things, I see something popping up in Central Florida now. Another warning popping up down that way. We had that gust that was very significant. Let me take off our flash flood warning super because they don't have any of that down there right now, but this warning doesn't quite get into St. Cloud or Kissimmee yet, but Pine Pond of all sides and 60-mile-an-hour wind gust possible there. Right around Universal Studios, there's a concern for that. That's not good. Hopefully it's not quite that big, but again, just continuing to give you guys the very latest here. That's the severe thunderstorm warning for parts of Orange County until 6:30 in Central Florida, not in our area. There's also a new severe thunderstorm warning now extending from the Chuleota area. We now have, University of Central Florida tended concern, but now down toward Wedgefield. There's a concern for 60-mile-an-hour wind gusts and half-dollar size hail. So these are some pretty ferocious storms, more isolated. They were to take advantage of the environment because they're a little more by themselves. This is some very, high energy that we're seeing here as we're looking at things, as we're tracking things here in the weather situation. So again, just continuing to give you guys the very latest here on what's going on. Continuing to keep you guys up to date here on this situation. So that's the storyline of the Orlando stations we're following, though, for sure. As we're looking down towards Central Florida, there'll be all 5 of them will be on top of that. But as we look here, it's much cooler right now. We've had the 8 around, but a lot of cooler air toward parts of north central northeast Florida. So that can be helpful, to maybe stabilize things some. Also feel a little bit better. Tallahassee's not cooler, but lower rain chances out there, at least today, as we're looking at Albany. Same deal. Let me pull up a model, though, because I want to see what it's showing, if anything's changed. I know, things can change sometimes on us. I mean, that's not doing a good job, quite honestly, and it maybe because we're lacking some of that data from the Jacksonville side. I think as you look ahead, it's still not much more development after what we've had, though. Timing wasn't quite right, though. But again, as we're looking at things, as we're tracking things here, that flash flood warning does continue. Again, all that, rainfall there. I saw a little bit of hail, half-inch hail is reported at. Okay, was that just... That seemed like that must have been a delayed report, but it says it was only 5 minutes ago. I don't think we're having hail now, but earlier there probably was some hail in that storm when it was at its peak. It was, around severe limits, it looked like. And then it, dumping all that rain, that led to the flash flood warning, the potential for the rapid water rise. I'm sure we had that in some areas of the most flood vulnerable in St. Augustine. So that's definitely cause for concern as we're looking at things, as we're tracking things. Again, just trying to give you guys the very latest here on the situation. I'm going to zoom back out a little bit. And I think we're going to wrap it. I know we have a pretty strong storm in Hamilton County, it looks like. It's kind of on the edge between the cooler and the warmer air. Of course, down to Central Florida is where they have really nasty storms down there. So they have to watch those. We could even get a quick, let me check some stuff here. Well, they're known for some quick spin-up tornadoes this time of year occasionally. So we'll have to watch for that. Hopefully not. Hopefully it didn't happen, but it's not out of the question. Okay, so we're going to wrap it. Stay tuned here, for more updates if warranted, but just stay safe, still watch out for some, flooded roadways and a few spots in the Ward St. Augustine, that St. John County area, that small green polygon still in effect for a little while longer, technically to 6:45, but things should start to drain a little bit more. I know it's already flood prone, pretty urban area, all that concrete there and the like, but should start to drain here a little bit. So just be careful though, use caution. I know we have this area here we're watching. We have some thunderstorm watches up toward New York and the like. That's the national story. Some flash flood warnings back, to the west of those thunderstorm warnings in general, but we're going to wrap it for now. Stay tuned, everybody. Stay safe. We'll be back if needed.